Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and I wanted to give my thoughts on a recent forum post by Severlin about in-game loot boxes, update 23, and beyond. So if you haven't heard, Severlin made a post on the LOTRO forums about that and basically what gearing would be like in update 23 and beyond. So I will link that down in the description, but I'll go ahead and read some of the main points and mainly just give my thoughts on that in this video. So the level cap will be raised to 120 in update 23, and they said that's a great opportunity to make some adjustments, and in this forum post they're explaining how some things like gearing will work in the future. So I do want to mention overall I do think this is good, but I'll go ahead and read some of the more specifics they have here. So they say there shouldn't be any gear in loot boxes that you don't have a chance to acquire by playing the game. I think that is something that should be true. You shouldn't be able to get better than like raid gear from loot boxes or something like that, or just different gear. I think you should be able to barter for any gear in loot boxes, which it sounds like that's what they're going to be doing. So they also say on the day that new content is released, players should not be able to get the brand new gear with in-game currency or store purchases. So the initial rush from content, it sounds like the players will actually have to play that new content to get rewards for completing it, instead of just being able to barter for gear or buy gear basically from the loot boxes right when content's released. So it'll actually take time to get gear, or take time doing content to get gear. And then gear that comes from the raid at highest difficulty will always be more powerful than comparable gear that comes from loot boxes. So raids will have better gear than anything you can get in loot boxes, which I think is also something that should be true, but this makes it sound like loot boxes could maybe get you gear equal to instances still as well. Or at least stuff you can barter for, so we'll have to see where that goes. And if gears come from a raid, you need to complete the raid at least once before you can obtain the gear from a vendor using the in-game currency, and that's something that actually remains unchanged. I think that's how it works now, at least. So then they go into some additional details with how the in-game system will work in update 23, and this is what I actually find to be interesting, because I think the in-game gearing process, it just hasn't been something that's really worked for me. And it's not necessarily because of the loot boxes, but I just think the gearing's been kind of annoying, frustrating process, especially in Mordor, I think. And a little bit before that with the, kind of updates with levels 85, 95, I didn't do too much. But even 100, some of the parts were annoying, but I don't think it was too bad, because you could run instances and still get decent gear for at least starting to raid and stuff like that. It looks like raid gear, as usual, will be better than instance gear, and higher tier difficulties will give you better gear, so that seems to be pretty similar to how it is now. And then they did note that one big difference in update 23 and beyond is Embers of enchantment, which are like ashes of whatever they're called in Mordor or update 22 now. Whatever you get from disenchanting gear, basically. And you'll actually get them directly from quests instead of loot boxes, which I think is a majorly good change, so you can actually do stuff to directly get the ashes instead of having to open loot boxes or just disenchant gear. So for some older content, I don't know what they mean exactly by older content, if they mean like anything Moria and above, or older content as in Mordor and update 22, or stuff before that. Older gear can disenchant into motes of enchantment, and these motes will have their own vendor, and I think these can give you some of the older gear pieces, maybe some cosmetics and stuff like that. So it looks like loot boxes will continue to appear in game, which was suspect from this whole post, but you can still buy keys from the LOTRO store to open them, and they'll have cosmetics and gear, but the gear that will be available is identical to the Ember vendor gear, so that's the gear you get from disenchanting into Embers or doing quests or anything. I think it sounds like maybe instances can also get you that. I would really hope that featured instances, and that's another thing I want to talk about towards the end of this video, that they'll give you some Embers of enchantment. I think that's what they were called. Yeah, Embers of enchantment, so that you can just barter for gear with that, and then have a chance, if you do happen to have loot boxes or buy keys, that you can also get some of that gear pieces from the loot boxes. And then any cosmetics that are available from the loot boxes sounds like they'll also be available for barter by the Embers vendor. And they say it will arrive a few weeks or so after new content is released, so a few weeks sounds like a long time to me. I'm thinking like 2 months. Maybe they only mean 1 month, which is still kind of long, I guess. I don't know. But I do like that they are encouraging you to actually run the content for something like raiding to get that type of gear from the barter with the Embers. So one point they did made is loot boxes are not required to gear up, but they can help you catch up on gearing or just get some cosmetics. I'm personally not a fan of cosmetics being in the same loot box as gear, because some people just want the cosmetics and then they get gear and it's kind of useless. Or some people will just use them to catch up on gearing, like they said, but then they don't really want the cosmetics. So I'm personally still not a fan of that, but I think it's a better stride than where they were before with Update 22 and Mordor, as far as how that works. And then somebody actually made a point of they want to reward players who are awesome enough to support the long-term success of the game by opening loot boxes. But somebody made the point that it sounds like they're rewarding players who just want to open loot boxes and not like VIP players or people who spend on other stuff. So that's slightly concerning, but it's just interesting. I think I would at least think they would want to reward players more who support the game by, subscribing VIP, buying actual content like expansions and stuff like that. So that was just something somebody noticed and pointed out, and I thought it was interesting too. So they do say that they'll be hearing our thoughts, and we'll see going forward if they make any changes with this, but overall I think it sounds like some good changes. It sounds like gearing will basically be more about, at least after the content's released, about bartering instead of just opening loot boxes, which I greatly prefer. And it sounds like you can get these Embers from doing a variety of in-game things like questing, I think even doing deeds, they said. I can't find that right now, actually. You can do it from raiding. I hope instances. I haven't seen anything specifically about instances, but I do hope they can drop from like instance bosses and chests in the instances. And that's a other point I wanted to get to with featured instances. I really hope they make featured instances feel more rewarding again. When they came out around level 100, actually, I guess is what I'm thinking of. I think they came out at level 95, but they felt really rewarding because you could get some great, well, goodish, I should say, starter gear for like Endgame, more of the raiding type gear. This was before I think they had all that bartering stuff with Mordor that came. But I think that was a pretty good system to get you some basically starter in-game gear running featured instances, and it was something easy to do on alts, and me being an altaholic with a bunch of alts that I like to play at endgame and get them basically that base gear just to have them in a good situation and feel comfortable playing them with some harder content. So I really hope to see featured instances incorporated into this new system where you'll get rewarded more for doing them, hopefully through Embers. So you can just buy the gear pieces you want on alts, and maybe even they make the Embers account bound, like I think the Ashes or Moats, Ashes of Enchantment that they're called now, end up becoming account bound, so you can actually buy pieces of gear for your alts on your main character if you get a bunch on them through doing these various in-game activities. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Overall, I think this is a great step forward, and I'm excited to see these changes, how they work with level 120. I have not been paying attention pretty much at all to update 23. This is the first thing I was really able to sit down and read and process my thoughts a little bit about. I don't really know what else is coming besides the name of the update. I just found out is Were Dragons. Well, I didn't even know it was called that. And I knew the level cap was going to be raised to 120, and that was about it before this, so I'll have to do some reading up to catch up on update 23. But I hope you all enjoyed hearing and listening to my thoughts about this video. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, and thanks for watching, everyone.